They feel something. Maybe it's the quiet warmth in your gaze, the calm way you move through the world, or simply how your presence lingers after you've left the room. But despite what stirs inside them, they do not reach out. Not a message, not a call, not even a passing word, and it leaves you wondering, if they feel it too, then why the silence? In this video, we step into the hidden chambers of human emotion through the lens of stoicism and raw self-awareness to understand what keeps people from acting on what they feel. You'll learn that sometimes desire is muffled not by absence of emotion, but by fear, pride, misperception, and timing. So, if you've ever been left in the quiet wake of what could have been, this one's for you. Take a moment, settle in, and if this video resonates with the calm strength you seek to build, consider subscribing to the Everlasting Stoic. It's not just a channel, it's a space for those who strive to feel deeply, think clearly, and live with quiet power. Now, let us begin. Chapter 1. Attraction seems too easy. There's a strange irony in the realm of attraction. When something feels too accessible, it often loses its perceived value. Not in truth, but in perception. And perception in the delicate game of connection shapes everything. When someone senses they could have you without effort, they begin to wrestle with a thought they may not even fully articulate. If it's this easy, why chase it? You see, the human mind has a bias towards struggle. We associate effort with worth, resistance with meaning. It's deeply ingrained. The reward we earn is more treasured than the one handed to us. So when someone feels they already hold your attention, your time, perhaps even your affection, they may withdraw not out of disinterest, but out of confusion. They ask themselves, why does this feel so effortless? Is it real, or is it just temporary validation? Have I earned this, or is it simply being offered to anyone willing to accept it? That voice of doubt creeps in. It tells them that maybe the intensity is artificial. Maybe the depth isn't depth at all, but an illusion created by your openness. They question whether the bond is genuine or simply comfortable. And because comfort can sometimes be mistaken for mediocrity, they hesitate, not because they don't feel, but because they don't know if they should feel. Attraction, when received too quickly, can feel like a song with no build-up, pleasant, but lacking tension. And tension, as paradoxical as it sounds, is the heartbeat of early romance. The sense that something is earned, not assumed, that it's unfolding, not already settled. Stoicism teaches us to cultivate indifference to what lies beyond our control. And yet in relationships, we often surrender control in subtle ways. Replying too quickly, showing up too eagerly, giving away the mystery. That mystery, for better or worse, is often the spark that keeps others reaching. When it vanishes, so does their pursuit. This doesn't mean you must play games. Games are cheap. But it does mean you must protect your presence like a currency. If you give it away without requiring investment, you cheapen your own value, not in truth, but in their perception. That's what they respond to, even unconsciously. Many times, people don't reach out because they think they already have you. And that thought, though flattering on the surface, kills the very drive that leads to deeper pursuit. They feel the warmth of your attention and mistake it for the full flame. They stop moving forward because they believe the door is already wide open. No resistance needed, but a door that opens too easily is often overlooked, even stepped through without a second glance. In truth, you might be the rarest soul they've ever met. You might be everything they're quietly seeking. But if they do not feel the need to reach, they may not reach at all. This is why restraint matters. This is why holding space, rather than constantly filling it, becomes powerful. It allows others to sit with their emotions, to miss you, to feel the weight of your absence, and to choose you, not just accept you. Let them feel the tension of not knowing. Let them feel your presence, then wonder where it's gone. Let them taste your attention, but never drown in it. In doing so, you reframe the dynamic from they have you to they must rise to meet you. And that shift, that's where real pursuit begins. Have you ever given too much, too quickly, only to feel the connection slip through your fingers? Share your story in the comments. Someone out there might find clarity in your reflection. Chapter 2: Fear of being hurt. We are all shaped by what came before. Every silence we endured, every wound we pretended didn't hurt, every goodbye we never wanted to say. And so, when feelings begin to bloom again, they do not always come with joy. Sometimes they arrive with dread. You see, the person who doesn't reach out may carry more emotion than you know. Their heart might beat faster when they see your name. Their thoughts may wander to you in quiet hours. They may even craft entire conversations with you in their head, and yet say nothing. Why? Because feeling something again means risking something again. When someone has been hurt, truly hurt, they learn to fear the very emotions they crave. They remember the night they waited for a reply that never came. The way someone slowly drifted from daily affection to distant coldness. The sensation of being replaced, ignored, forgotten. These memories form invisible walls, not made of bitterness but of self-preservation. They may want to reach out, but each time they consider it, their mind plays tricks on them. What if I'm bothering them? What if they don't feel the same? What if I open the door and no one's waiting on the other side? These questions loop endlessly, and in the absence of clarity, the safest answer is no action at all. Stoicism teaches us to prepare for hardship, to accept that pain is part of living, not to be feared, but embraced with grace. Yet even the Stoic soul flinches when the wound is still fresh, and many walking among us are not healed. They are simply hiding. They wear calmness like armor, smile in place of speaking their truth, and mask longing with indifference. You think they don't care, but really, they're terrified that you don't. The fear of rejection runs deep. And in modern life, rejection doesn't always come in words. It comes in delays, in silence, in casual indifference, in a seen message left unanswered. That's the new heartbreak. And some would rather feel nothing than feel that again, so they hold back. They convince themselves that detachment is safer. They listen to their heart but silence its voice. They retreat into the comfort of solitude, because at least there, the only person who can disappoint them is themselves. They think, if I don't reach out, I won't be let down. They think, if I never express how I feel, I'll never be embarrassed. They think, if I stay silent, maybe the other person will make the first move. But the silence they choose becomes the prison they live in. And what makes it worse, they may see your kindness and assume it's temporary. They may feel your attention and fear it will fade. They may even believe that someone like you is too good to be true. So instead of risking their heart, they walk away from the one thing that could actually heal it. It is not lack of emotion that keeps people silent. It's often the overwhelming presence of emotion and the terrifying fragility that comes with it. And so, they wait. Not because they don't care, but because they care too much. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones most afraid to love again. And sometimes the silence isn't rejection, it's protection. Have you ever held back out of fear? Tell me in the comments. Not just for me, but for the ones who need to see they're not alone. Chapter 3. Signals get misread. So much of connection is not in what is said, but in what is felt, and even more often, in what is assumed. We live in a world saturated with noise, words tossed around without weight, reactions that don't always match intention, and gestures too easily misunderstood. And in this haze, even genuine signals get misread. When someone doesn't reach out, it's tempting to believe they're disinterested. But what if they're simply confused? Not by your presence, but by the meaning behind it. You might think your subtle smile spoke volumes, that your pause before walking away meant stay a little longer, that your reply, while delayed, was still warm enough to be inviting. But what they see, or rather what they think they see, may be an entirely different story. Human perception is a deeply flawed interpreter. It filters emotion through insecurity, runs intention through the biases of the past, and often converts silence into rejection. When someone has been conditioned to believe they're too much, they may read your stillness as avoidance. When they've been dismissed before, they may interpret your emotional restraint as coldness. And when they've experienced inconsistent affection, they may view your independence not as strength, but as distance. Here's the painful truth. No matter how clearly you think you're expressing interest, it only lands if the other person is receptive enough to trust it. You could text back with warmth, and they'll still wonder, are they just being polite? You could initiate conversation, and they'll ask, do they do this with everyone? You could show up with steady consistency, and they'll hesitate. Is this real, or is this just today? The fault isn't always with the sender. Sometimes, the receiver is simply reading with the wrong lens, a lens shaped by heartbreak, insecurity, or misplaced expectations. And the most tragic part, they may be misreading you, even as they yearn for you. Stoic philosophy teaches us to make peace with what is internal, and to release what we cannot control. But in love, it's easy to forget that another person's mind is not ours to hold. We cannot decide what they see in our gaze. We cannot dictate how they translate our kindness. All we can do is move with sincerity and let go of the need for perfect understanding. Still, it's worth remembering, miscommunication is not always due to carelessness. Sometimes it's a product of fear. They fear mistaking interest for kindness. They fear chasing someone who never meant to be chased. They fear embarrassment more than they crave connection. And so, when your messages are calm and composed, they read disinterest. When you don't mirror their overthinking, they read emotional distance. When you carry yourself with ease, they interpret it as lack of need. For them, the tragedy is mutual. You may be waiting for a sign to come closer. They may be waiting for the same. Two people, drawn to each other, both sitting in silence, misreading the other's silence as disinterest. If only we could see ourselves through the eyes of others. If only we could pause the cycle of projection and doubt and just speak plainly, honestly, without fear. But we are human, layered, cautious, scarred. So we retreat into interpretation instead of conversation. They do not reach out, not because the feeling is missing, but because the translation is broken. They've misread you, just as you might be misreading them. Have you ever hesitated because you weren't sure what their signals meant? Comment with a story or reflection. Your voice might help someone realize they weren't alone in the confusion. Chapter 4. They await your lead. There is a silence that doesn't stem from fear or rejection. It's a silence rooted in expectation. A waiting, subtle, still, heavy. And sometimes they're not reaching out, simply because they're waiting for you to, whether we like it or not. Many people, even confident ones, default to following energy rather than initiating it. They observe, they mirror, they hesitate until they're sure the ground beneath them won't disappear. This isn't weakness, it's caution. And in relationships, that caution often takes the form of passive waiting. They notice your rhythm, your timing, your distance, and they match. You take 2 days to reply. So do they. You pull back emotionally. They retreat just a little more. You stop checking in. They tell themselves to stay silent too. Not because they want to play games, but because they believe that following your lead is safer than walking ahead into uncertainty. After all, who wants to be the one who reaches first, only to find that no one is reaching back? We're conditioned to protect our pride, to act cool, collected, nonchalant, especially in an age of endless options and fast distractions. Revealing how much you care feels like surrendering power. So when you seem self-contained, they assume you prefer it that way. When you don't reach out, they assume silence is your boundary. They mirror what you give, even if what you give is absence. The Stoics were masters of self-control, of measured response. But even they acknowledged that the wise man does not live isolated from the world. He moves with intention, yes, but also with engagement. And perhaps this is where the Stoic path applies best. Not in waiting to be chosen, but in choosing when to move. If someone is mirroring your energy, they are not necessarily apathetic. They are responsive. They're watching to see if the door is still open. If the air between you still hums with interest, they may be silently hoping that you, the one they perceive as strong and grounded, will break the silence first, that you'll give them a reason to feel safe in expressing their own vulnerability. It's easy to assume that the one who doesn't text first simply doesn't care. But sometimes, they care so deeply that they don't want to disrupt the flow. They're waiting for a cue, a gesture, a word, anything that tells them, yes, it's safe. Yes, this is mutual. They are not cowards. They are cautious. And there's a difference. But here's the paradox. The more both people wait, the more distance grows. The more they interpret each other's restraint as a wall, until what began as a silent understanding becomes a graveyard of things never said. Sometimes the most stoic thing you can do is act. Not impulsively, but courageously. To give a small sign, not out of desperation, but out of clarity. Because if no one leads, no one follows, and nothing moves. Ask yourself, have you been so focused on appearing strong that you've forgotten how to be open? Have you been silent not from peace, but from fear of being the one who reaches? And more importantly, what if the other person is doing the exact same thing? This chapter might land differently for each of you. So here's something I'd like you to write. Right now, in the comments. Sometimes strength is making the first move. Not because you're weak, but because you understand how many people are silently waiting for permission to feel safe. Chapter 5. Doubts cloud their mind. They think of you, of that moment your eyes met across a room, of the conversation that lingered long after it ended, of the way your silence wasn't cold, but full of meaning. And yet, they don't reach out. Why? Because doubt is a storm. Quiet at first, then overwhelming. It creeps in through the smallest cracks. A question left unanswered. A pause too long. A gesture too subtle. And once it takes hold, it clouds everything. They ask themselves, did I imagine that connection? Was I reading too much into it? What if they're just being polite? The mind becomes a battlefield between desire and disbelief. One moment, they replay the signs that tell them you might feel the same. The next, they remind themselves not to assume. They analyze your tone, your timing, your every word. They dig through past experiences, through old wounds, trying to forecast how this will end. And when the future looks uncertain, they convince themselves it's better not to try at all. They do not lack feeling. They lack certainty. And that uncertainty feels like danger, because to them reaching out means exposure. It means placing their emotions in the open, vulnerable, and unguarded. It means risking your indifference, or worse, your politeness. You might wonder how doubt could be so paralyzing. But you must understand, doubt is not merely a lack of faith in you. It is often a lack of faith in themselves, in their ability to choose well, to be loved back, to be enough. Stoicism tells us to master our thoughts, to train the mind like a disciplined warrior. But most people have never been taught to wield that kind of control. They are not Stoics. They are survivors of betrayals, of false starts, of years spent being almost enough. And so, when someone like you enters their world, someone calm, composed, deep, it feels both magnetic and intimidating. They wonder, why would someone like that want me? And instead of moving toward you, they shrink away. Not because of anything you've done, but because their own reflection in the mirror doesn't match the image they see in you. Their doubt distorts reality. They begin to believe your kindness is just charisma. Your attention is just friendliness. Your presence, a coincidence. They overthink your every message. They hesitate to reply too fast. They second-guess everything, even their own heart. And in that swirl of inner noise, they choose silence. Not because they don't feel enough, but because they feel too much, and they don't know if it's real, if it's mutual, if it's safe. They would rather fantasize about what could be than risk watching it fall apart. And that is the deepest sorrow. Two people circling the same flame, both thinking the other does not see it. If doubt has ever made you walk away from something or someone you cared about, write about it. Not for me, but for the ones still walking in circles, waiting for clarity. Chapter 6. Your absence tests them. You stepped back, maybe not in anger, not in haste, but in silence. You didn't slam the door, you simply let it drift closed behind you. You stopped initiating. You withheld the steady glow of your presence, and now they feel it. Not with panic, but with that quiet ache that comes when something important goes missing. Whether or not you meant to test them, your absence became the test. And this is where it begins. The slow unraveling of the illusion that you would always be there. Because for a long time, they may have taken your presence as a constant. You were available, warm, consistent. You showed interest, and you showed up. And while they might have appreciated it on some level, they didn't feel urgency. They didn't feel the need to act. Why chase what isn't moving? Why reach when nothing seems to be slipping away? But now the air is different. You're not around like you once were. The messages don't come. The casual invitations vanish. The lingering looks are gone. And with that subtle shift, something primal awakens within them. A space once filled by your energy is now bare, and into that emptiness pours the echo of their own confusion. They wonder, was that real? Did I miss something? Are they gone? Or just quiet? This is the power of absence. Not as punishment, but as mirror, because now, in the quiet, they finally hear their own inner dialogue without the distraction of your attention. They begin to realize that your presence had become more than just a comfort. It had been an anchor, and without it, they feel the drift. Your absence does something else too. It strips away the noise. It makes their own feelings louder. The ones they buried, the ones they doubted, the ones they brushed aside because they thought time was on their side. Stoicism teaches us to withdraw, not out of spite, but out of self-discipline. To detach not because we don't care, but because we will not beg. Your silence, when aligned with that principle, becomes not just distance, it becomes definition. It says, I am not here to be taken for granted. I am not here to orbit your uncertainty. I move with purpose, not permission. When you remove yourself, you give them the chance to see what life feels like without you. And that's often the moment the truth crystallizes. Not in your presence, but in your absence. But don't mistake this process as linear. Their response may not come quickly. Some people don't awaken immediately. They resist it. They distract themselves. They rationalize. They may even double down on silence, hoping you'll return on your own. Yet the longer you stay away, the more evident it becomes. You weren't clinging. You weren't waiting. You weren't trying to be missed. You simply returned to yourself. And that is what stings. Because now they must ask, did I wait too long? Were they giving me chances and I didn't take them? Did I mistake patience for passivity? That haunting phrase, I thought they'd always be there, rings in their chest. And now that you're gone, they finally feel the weight of what they never claimed. Your absence, done with dignity, becomes a lesson far louder than words. It tells them that your love is not something they can reach for, only when it's convenient. That your time is not an open-ended offer. That your presence was a privilege, not a placeholder. If you've ever been on the other side of this, realizing too late what someone meant once they were gone, write about it below. That reflection might help someone recognize what they have before it disappears. Chapter 7. They guard their heart. To open oneself is to risk being pierced. And some have been pierced so often, so deeply, that they have grown tired of the bleeding. They guard their heart, not because they feel nothing, but because they have felt too much for too long. What you see as emotional distance might actually be the fortress they built after years of longing that led to pain. Every unread message, every ghosted affection, every betrayal masquerading as love, it carved bricks into their chest, until one day they decided that silence was safer than sincerity. This is what makes them cautious. This is what keeps them from reaching out. It's not arrogance. It's not pride. It's protection. In a world where vulnerability is often mocked or mishandled, they chose armor. And now that you've stirred something soft in them, something alive, they are afraid of their own reaction. They think, if I let this grow, I might get hurt again. If I speak up, they might pull away. If I care too much, I lose control. And control is the last thing they have. Stoicism teaches us that the only true freedom is mastery of self, of one's reactions, one's impulses, one's internal world. But even the Stoic knows that mastery is not about avoidance. It's about discernment. The person who guards their heart has not yet learned this distinction. They believe that control means withholding, that calm means detachment, that safety means silence. But deep within them, something stirs. A longing for the old days, not for the people who hurt them, but for the version of themselves before they were afraid. The self that could love fully, laugh without calculation, chase something beautiful without imagining its end. When they see you, strong, composed, perhaps even open, they don't always trust it. They wonder, is this real? Will this disappear like the others? Do I dare hope again? And that inner battle becomes paralyzing. So they watch you. They think of you. They imagine what it would feel like to reach out, to ask a question, to share something small, to crack open the vault just an inch. And then the fear pulls them back, because letting you in would mean letting go of control. It would mean risking peace for possibility. And when you've been burned enough, even peaceful loneliness feels preferable to hopeful vulnerability. But here's the paradox. Every time they guard their heart, they isolate the very thing they crave. They crave closeness, but retreat. They crave trust, but doubt. They crave love, but silence it. You might wonder, should I break through that wall? But the truth is, you cannot. You can only be the kind of presence that makes the wall feel unnecessary. Do not chase them. Do not knock endlessly. That only feeds their fear. Instead, remain rooted, calm, self-contained, available but not waiting, caring but not desperate. You become the example of what it means to be safe. And over time, that safety might become more persuasive than words. You see, the guarded heart doesn't respond to pressure. It responds to patience. Eventually, they'll have to decide. Stay behind the fortress or risk the beauty of being seen. And that decision will be theirs, not yours. If you've ever kept someone out to protect yourself, even when you wanted them in, share your thoughts. You never know who else might be building the same wall. Chapter 8. They avoid tipping the scale. When emotions feel delicate, when the connection is still blooming, still uncertain, many people live in fear of tipping the scale. Not the scale of logic, but the scale of balance between two hearts. They worry, if I say too much, they might pull away. If I express interest, they might feel smothered. If I make a move, the magic might break. So they do nothing. They hover in the gray, suspended between potential and paralysis. And they convince themselves that by staying still, they're preserving what exists. But in truth, what they're preserving is stagnation. Because life and love does not grow without movement. The scale must shift, must tremble, must occasionally teeter, or it remains meaningless. And yet, they hesitate. They might tell themselves, everything is going well. Why risk ruining it? But what they're really saying is, I fear being the one who cares more. Because let's be honest, the modern dance of intimacy has become less about connection and more about calculation. How long should I wait before texting back? How much interest is too much? If I reply too fast, will I seem desperate? If I call instead of message, will I come on too strong? And these questions, subtle as they are, create a weight on the mind, a burden of overthinking, a fear that the smallest gesture could tip the dynamic off balance and expose vulnerability. So they delay. They retreat. They pretend to be indifferent. Not because they are, but because they want to preserve the illusion that they are the one being pursued. They mistake equilibrium for safety, not realizing that in love, true balance comes from mutual movement, not mutual restraint. Stoicism teaches us to act in accordance with nature, to let our choices be informed not by emotion, but by reason. But reason is not passivity. It's not emotional suppression. It's clarity. And clarity in this context would reveal something simple. The scale must move to find its resting point. If both people avoid tipping it, it never tips. If both people avoid expression, nothing is expressed. And what remains is not harmony, it's hesitation. Now imagine this. They care about you deeply. They think about you often. They watch your life from afar, noticing even the smallest signs. But they do not reach out, do not initiate, do not ask, because they are terrified of shifting the weight too far. They'd rather keep things as is than risk losing them. They fear becoming the one who loves more. But that fear becomes its own sabotage. Because in doing nothing, they guarantee that nothing changes. No new depth is reached. No truth is spoken. No connection is tested for strength. And this is where they fail themselves. Because love, like all meaningful things, must pass through discomfort, through imbalance, through the unknown. You might never know how deeply someone felt, not because the feeling wasn't real, but because they were so afraid to disturb the moment that they chose silence. If you've ever held your heart hostage to keep the scales balanced, even at the cost of something beautiful, write about it below. Let that be your release and someone else's mirror. Chapter 9. Timing feels wrong. It's one of the oldest truths in connection. Sometimes the feeling is right, but the timing is not. And so they don't reach out. Not because they don't want to. Not because they don't see your worth. But because in their current reality, the idea of something deeper, even with someone extraordinary, feels impossible. Maybe they're in transition, healing from something unresolved, drowning in responsibility, caught between identity shifts or personal reinvention. Whatever the reason, they look at you and think, not now. I can't handle now. And instead of opening the door, they stay quiet. They tell themselves it's noble, that they're sparing you, that you deserve someone more available, more present, more whole. And maybe they're right. Or maybe they're just afraid of beginning something they aren't sure they can sustain. Stoicism doesn't ignore timing. It acknowledges kairos, the opportune moment, the understanding that even right action must align with right timing to bear fruit. And for many, that timing is elusive. They wait for clarity, for control, for perfection. But life rarely grants perfect timing. Most of us are always in the middle of something. A crisis, a rebuild, a new dream. And while timing is a factor, it is often used as a shield. They might say, now's not good. But what they mean is, I'm not ready to be seen this deeply. They might say, I have too much going on. But what they mean is, I'm afraid that I won't be enough for you. Not right now. And so, they choose inaction. Because reaching out now would mean confronting the ways in which they feel unprepared. It would mean exposing you to their flaws. And that, for someone who cares, is terrifying. But here's the tragedy. The right person rarely arrives when we're ready. They arrive when we need them. When the mirror they hold up shows us who we are and who we could be. And that confrontation, that opportunity, is either embraced or feared. Some people will delay until the moment passes. Others will step into it, imperfect, unsure, but willing. The ones who delay often do so silently. They don't reject you. They don't confront you. They simply don't reach out. And you're left wondering whether they ever felt anything at all. But the truth is more complex. They felt it. They feel it still. But timing, in their eyes, has become a gate, and they don't yet know if they're allowed to walk through. And so, they leave the possibility suspended in midair, not closed, not open, just floating, unresolved. You may never know what could have happened. Not because you weren't worth it, but because they convinced themselves that they weren't. Not right now. If you've ever met someone at the wrong time, leave a line below, maybe just this: the timing was wrong, but the feeling was right. Let that line carry the weight of what might have been. Conclusion: they didn't reach out, and maybe now you understand why. It wasn't always coldness. It wasn't always apathy. Often, it was fear, or pride, or uncertainty, or pain, or timing. So many things, none of them simple. None of them easy to untangle. You were not imagining the connection, but you were alone in navigating it. And that's where your strength was forged. Because while they hesitated, you grew. You asked the hard questions. You practiced restraint without bitterness. You learned what it meant to stay still without surrendering your worth. That, in itself, is stoic. To seek understanding rather than blame. To remain rooted when others float away. To rise in silence when the noise of absence could have broken you. So what happens now? Maybe nothing. Maybe this chapter ends with a soft closing. Or maybe someday they will reach out with clarity, with courage, with readiness. But by then you'll have already written a new story, one not dependent on their voice. Until then, stay centered, stay whole, stay open, but only to those who value your presence while it's still near. If this video resonated, if it gave you clarity or calm, I'd be honored if you'd subscribe to The Everlasting Stoic. This space was built for people like you, quiet warriors who carry deep hearts and wiser minds. And before you go, leave a thought in the comments. Share the moment you realized someone felt something, but stayed silent. Or type this simple truth: now I understand why they didn't reach out. You never know who needs to hear that today. Until next time, remain steadfast. And remember, your presence is not common. It is a gift. Let them earn it.